Dobar dan. That means good day in Croatian. Talkcast PDX on the web, talkcastpdx.com. What is it? It's Tuesday, January 18th, 2022. Name of the show is The Bogdanich Perspective. I'm your host, Paul Bogdanich, and welcome. Yesterday was a market holiday. Today, last time I looked, let's look here. The markets were down. They're at 45.73, which is slightly below the 100-day moving average. So they're down about whatever it is, I can't read, 1.9%, almost 1.93% today. So first day of the week. Yesterday was a holiday. Episode 44, going to call it Adapt. Got to be adaptable, got to be flexible, got to be willing to adapt, changing situation, everything's in flux. It's January 18th. The president gets sworn in on January 20th of, the year after the election. And that means we have 3 more years of this shit, excuse my language, to put up with. But misadministration is palpable. I'm part of the Talkcast PDX network, and I broadcast on their channel on YouTube and so on, and YouTube has very strict rules about what you can't say. So I have to be careful. So the language is going to be sterile as normal. We had a couple of objective events last week, and Justin, if you could please put up graphic number 1. And this is interesting. This is just me talking about stuff that I find interesting. Should be up on your screen. Okay, there's 4 plates. On the upper left-hand corner, that is an atoll, and it's called Honga Tonga, was its name. Honga Tonga. In case you want to know where that is, that's about 40 miles north of the island of Tonga. And the island of Tonga is about 1,250 miles northeast of New Zealand, which is a nice way of saying that it's way out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The closest ground is New Zealand, 1,300 miles away. But the upper left-hand plate is what it used to look like, and that's a volcano, or the top of one sticking out of the water. The top right-hand plate is just the satellite picture. And you can see the curve of the Earth on the top of that picture, just to give you some scale, and then the different cloud formations. And then the bottom left is the beginning of the volcanic explosion, and the bottom right is the maximum extent of the volcanic explosion. But Honga Tonga blew up. We're still waiting for ash estimates to the stratosphere because there was a lot of water. A lot of that gas happens to be steam, so it doesn't look like it threw as much ejecta into the atmosphere as Mount Pinatubo did, but it's very impressive. The satellite pictures that I saw this morning indicate that the whole atoll in the upper left-hand picture is gone. It's open ocean at this point. Don't know how deep, but you can take that one down, Justin. And that was very interesting. Obviously, this was caught on satellite, so they didn't have any boats in the area to do the observation. If you could take that one down and put up number 2, please. And then the other piece of objective news that happened last week is the producer price index and the consumer price index came out, and they were released on the 13th of January and the 12th of January, respectively. And because these were released in January for the month of December, the headline numbers for the month of December were the PPI was up 0.2 and the CPI was up 0.5. But what made the news is because it was December, they did the entire year, 2021, January to December. And the numbers, and that's likely what you saw in the press or what's on the bottom there. And you can see that the big headline number was inflation. Consumer price inflation went up 7%. And those were the main categories that were listed in the press. I'm sure you may have seen this. Food up 7%, gasoline up almost 50%. Natural gas up almost 25%, then electricity 6.3, clothing, transportation, used cars. The car market is just terrible if you're a buyer. So, up like over a third, and then shelter up 4.1%, and medical costs up 2.5%, which is a gross underestimation. But if you look at the top portion of that graph, those are the numbers for December, the month of December only. And the only thing that went up by a big margin was eggs, almost 50%. And the reason for that is the counterproductive, some would say insane, but I'll just use the word counterproductive. COVID policies in Canada and the United States forced the destruction of over 1 million pounds of live chickens, without even ever making it to the market. Just stupid. Price of beef and veal went down. Price of fresh fruits and vegetables went down. Price of gasoline went down. Price of natural gas went down on the producer prices and the consumer prices. So it looks like inflation, you can take that one down as well, Justin. It looks like inflation will continue, but that it should be less. Well, it's hard to say. It's only January, but assuming they don't do anything else really stupid, it should be less than in 2022 than it was in 2021, but still substantial, probably on the order of 4 or 5% instead of 7. As I mentioned in prior shows, the vaccination mandates came up before the Supreme Court, and they heard oral arguments on January 7th, and then they issued the rulings, 2 different cases, on January 13th. The 2 cases were Biden versus the Federation of National Federation of Independent Businesses, so NFIB. Biden versus the NFIB. And then the second one was Missouri versus Biden. The first one was the vaccine mandate for all employers with over 100 workers. That's the Biden versus NFIB. And then the second one was the vaccine mandate for healthcare workers that working in institutions that receive Medicare or Medicaid funds, which is basically all of them. But those are the 2 cases, and they issued the decision in the first one, which was Biden versus the National Federation of Independent Businesses. The decision was short and sweet. I took out the legalese and condensed a couple of paragraphs. The operative words of the decision, if you will permit me to read. The Secretary General is a Biden administration official that was in charge of arguing the case in front of the Supreme Court. Solicitor General. I'm thinking in the original German again here. It's the Solicitor General in the United States. Okay. The Solicitor General does not dispute that OSHA is limited to regarding work-related dangers. She instead argues that the risk of contracting COVID-19 qualifies as such a danger. We cannot agree. Although COVID-19 is a risk that occurs in many workplaces, it is not an occupational hazard in most. COVID-19 can and does spread at home, in schools, during sporting events, and elsewhere that people gather. That kind of universal risk is no different from the day-to-day dangers that all of us face from crime, air pollution, or any other number of communicable diseases. Permitting OSHA to regulate the hazards of daily life, simply because most Americans have jobs and face those same risks while on the clock, would significantly expand OSHA's regulatory authority without clear congressional authorization. The employer mandates are out of here. And it just very short decision. In other words, it's not a occupational hazard; it's a life hazard, similar to what did they say? Crime, air pollution, or any other number of things that we face day to day. So OSHA can't regulate it, so those mandates are out. Doesn't mean that people won't pursue them anyway, but if they do, then the liability for whatever happens attaches to them. And that's the salient part of that decision. How did that one go? Well, I'll get to the votes later. But Biden v. Missouri. This is the Medicare-Medicaid case. And they allowed the Biden administration mandates to stand in the Medicare-Medicaid case. And the way that one ran, and this is quoting from the decision again, quote, both Medicare and Medicaid are administered by the Secretary of Health and Human Services, who has general statutory authority to promulgate regulations as may be necessary to the efficient administration of the functions with which he is charged. One such function is to ensure that healthcare providers protect their patients' health and safety. To that end, Congress authorized the Secretary to promulgate, as a condition of the facility's participation in the programs, such requirements as he finds necessary in the interests and health and safety of individuals who are furnished services in the institution. Such conditions have long included requirements that providers maintain and enforce an infection and prevention control program designed to prevent the development and transmission of communicable diseases and infections. And I won't go on to read the rest of it, but basically what they found was that Congress, in this particular case, according to 1986 and 1989 laws, authorized the Secretary to do this. A lot of people, the court stayed away, and indeed the petitioners, particularly Missouri versus the Biden administration and the states, they did not argue the experimental nature of the vaccine. They did not argue that the change in situation in between the case when these cases were originally brought and today questions the utility of the program. And so they didn't argue that. So the Supreme Court basically on both cases issued a very narrow legalistic ruling. And what did they say? They said this court is not a public health authority. So in other words, they stayed away from the particulars of that. They issued two very narrow opinions and said that in one case, the secretary had the authority in the Medicare-Medicaid case, and that the other case, he did not. The concurring and dissenting opinions were of note. In concurring with the NFIB case, Justice Gorsuch released a concurring opinion. He voted with the majority, is what concurring means. And he said, the central question we face today is who decides? The only question is whether an administrative agency in Washington may mandate the vaccination or regular testing of 84 million people, or whether, as 27 states before it submit, the work belongs to the state and local governments across the country and the people's elected representatives in Congress. This court is not a public health authority, but it is charged with resolving disputes about which authorities possess the power to make the laws that govern us under the Constitution. The state and local authorities enjoy the general power of governing, including all sovereign powers envisioned by the Constitution that are not specifically vested in the federal government. The federal government's powers, however, are not general, but limited and divided. Not only must the federal government properly invoke a constitutionally enumerated source of authority to regulate in this area or any other, it must also act consistently with the separation of powers. And when it comes to this obligation, the court has established at least one firm rule. And then he goes on to cite the decision in the rent moratorium case that was decided late last year. And his argument refers to what they call the major questions doctrine. In other words, who has the power under the Constitution? To go on to quote the justice, why does the major questions doctrine matter? It ensures that national government's power to make the laws that govern us remain where Article 1 of the Constitution says it belongs, with the people's elected representatives. And then he goes on to opine. So that was the concurring opinion in the one case. The dissenting opinion in the Medicare Medicaid case, Biden v. Missouri, was issued by Justice Clarence Thomas. Being cognizant of the change, the court only considers the facts of the case when they were presented, and these cases were presented in mid-2020. Our knowledge of the health conditions has changed over that year. Justice Thomas tried to find a narrowing of the legalistic interpretation whereby the court didn't have to uphold the mandate, based on the facts that were before him. He argued the government has not established that either provision empowers it to impose a vaccine mandate. Rules carrying out the administration of Medicare and Medicaid are those that serve the practical management and direction of the programs. In other words, he wanted to reject the mandate application on the basis that they were micromanaging. The last sentence of his, or one of the last salient sentences in his dissent. Here, the omnibus rule compels millions of healthcare workers to undergo an unwanted medical procedure that cannot be removed at the end of the shift. Unquote. The justices on the Supreme Court, there's 9 of them. I like to call her Stoudemire. I've been informed that her name is Stoudemire. She's a diversity appointment under Obama. Kagan and Breyer, those 3 justices, voted in all cases to let the government do whatever it wants. Justices Thomas, Gorsuch, Alito, and Barrett voted in both cases to limit the government's power. So that left Justices Roberts and Kavanaugh. Roberts and Kavanaugh voted with the majority in the National Federation of Independent Businesses case, in other words, the private employer mandate, and they voted with the minority in the other case, the Missouri v. Biden. And so the decisions were 6-3, 5-4. In doing this research, I was reminded that Justices Souter and Kennedy and O'Connor are still alive. They're just retired. Interesting. 3, they didn't die in office like Ruth Bader Ginsburg. They didn't have to carry them out feet first. They just got to a certain age and retired. And I think more of our politicians and justices should follow their example. Where am I here? UV Biden. Got to adapt. I expect that the argument about efficacy will come back, now that it's 2022 instead of 2020 or 2021 when they started these suits with a different year of data. But it'll take another year to make it through the courts and blah, blah, blah. So, but everyone's trying to adapt. I'm telling you, not just here, but, all over the world. I saw in the news the Italians, the Interior Ministry bought a huge shipment, like a almost a shipful of masks for the army and the police and those type of people. But when they did that, they bought pink masks. So they bought the color is pink on this huge supply that they purchased, and this is in Italy. And the Italian police union complained and said that law enforcement officers' masks should be black, white, or blue in keeping with their uniform. The union asserted, and that wearing a pink mask while they're clubbing people for not having a vaccine passport and stuff would, quote unquote, risk damaging their reputation. So that's very interesting. Russian Orthodox Church, like say everybody's trying to adapt, world's changing. Russian Orthodox Church issued a prayer for those possessed by computer passion. In other words, spend too much time on your cell phone or computer. Couldn't find the text of the prayer. Wish I would have said it here with you, but I couldn't. It was in Cyrillic, so I couldn't find an American translation. Two police, got to adapt. I mean, everything's changing. Two Los Angeles police officers were fired. They were in their patrol car. A call came in for backup at some kind of like an armed robbery or something like that. But they were playing Pokemon, and they were in hot pursuit of a Pokemon character called a Snorlax. And apparently a Snorlax is a rare catch. And so when they got the call, they delayed while they continued to look for the Snorlax, got to arrest that Snorlax. And the video camera in the car showed them doing that. And so, they were fired. Fortunately, when they showed up, they weren't wearing pink masks. Microsoft, big corporate leader trying to adapt. Everybody's got to adapt. Included, and this is in their Word for Office 365, which is the newest version of their Office Word program, a thing called an inclusivity checker. All right. And it's in the latest version, and it suggests, quote unquote, more inclusive alternatives to commonly used words and phrases that might offend someone in relation to gender, age, sexual orientation, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status. For example, it suggests replacing mankind with humankind, maid with house cleaner, using the word principal instead of headmaster, workforce instead of manpower, and so on. And of course, it suggests changing boyfriend or girlfriend to lover. I find that, I don't like that. I find it, I object, in other words. And the reason I object is it's not artful. If you use that, you write, everything you write comes out like a machine wrote it, because a machine did write it. It tells you, what words to use and this and that. And in the case of changing, girlfriend or boyfriend to quote lover, as the machine would suggest, and making your text dry and politically correct. I mean, look, you think of the phrases, lady friend, gentleman friend, inamorata or inamorato, depending, paramour, sidecar, sweetheart, steady flame, swain, and a variety of less complimentary phrases that are sprinkled through the English language. And it just makes everything sound sterile. But, in their bid to try and adapt, they included an inclusivity checker. As for me and the community discussion guidelines that I operate under, I'm starting to lose the meaning of certain words. I'm not sure what the word safe means anymore. It's interesting in terms of these the COVID thing. We have another year's. It's been 2 years, but the studies have been going on for over a year. And when the first studies came out, they were what I would describe as observational. This many people in this group had this outcome, that many people in this group had that outcome, maybe this means this, that, and the other thing. Okay, fine. So you have all these observational researches that suggest doing this or suggest doing that or not doing this or not doing that. But they're all observational based on things. But we're to the point now where some very serious scientists out of MIT and Columbia and your research institutions of that nature are starting to come out with very detailed hypotheses concerning methods of action of the coronavirus and our response to it. And they say that this chemical goes to this organ and then it's this organ splits that chemical in two, then this piece of that chemical binds with this, and then other enzymes that exist in this particular organ modify the chemical to this, and then the chemical follows this pathway to this other organ where it produces these effects. But they're coming out with arguments that are very succinct, include complete methods of action, and as those are investigated, it's going to change everything again, in my opinion, because these hypotheses are so specific that they're easily testable. And so they'll start doing that, and then in another 3 months, you'll have another quantitative a change in the character of the data. And it's so I think everything's going to change. I think you're going to have to adapt. What did we say when we checked last time? The market was down 1.93% for the day. It's only down 1.87. What is that? 1.87. It came back a little bit. It's at 45.75. It's still below the 100-day moving average. Speaking of which, Justin, if you can put up graph number 3, please. And this is just our graph of the S&P 500 from December 31st, 2020 to March 31st, 2022. And prior to September 2nd, 2021, the Fed had it moving up in a channel at 30% a year. And that's the official name of the policy is the pandemic premium. As of September 2nd, in between September 2nd and October 4th, it started to fall out of the channel. And we hypothesized that what they're going to do is try and move it up at 30%, but in a new channel that was lower than the old one, where the low part of the channel on the old channel becomes the top of the new channel. Then that black line is what we've seen the Fed support the market at. And January 14th, which was last Friday, yesterday was a holiday, you'll remember, you can see that the market was just touching the bottom of the new presumed channel, which is 190 points wide compared to 160 for the old channel. But it was just touching. And like I say, today it's down on 1.8%. 1.9%. They'll finish it at about 1.6%. They'll try and recover it by the end of the day. But as we sit here now, it's down below that blue line. The 100-day moving average is the blue line, and it's where the market is touching that blue line, which is just about 5%. Can you take number 3 down and go to number 4? Number 4 is just zooming in on the other graph. But as you can see from this one, zooming in, you see way on the left-hand side the prior cycle low that was set on October 4th, and then the most recent all-time high, which was on January 3rd, and where the market is today, touching that blue line, extended out to where the market is now, of course, but touching that blue line is about 5% drop off the all-time high, which occurred January 3rd, which fits with what I was saying at the end of last year, that I thought the market was going to be weak in January. Like I said, it's weak today. We'll see what it does. I think the Fed would like to hold it in that channel, the pandemic premium, because I think that you can take that graph down. I think that supports the only part of the economy that's working, which is the consumer buying and spending. If they have what you want at the grocery store. I don't know how it is where you live, but I went to 3 last night in search of a specific product. 2 national chains and 1 local. Local store was pretty well stocked. Because they buy mostly local stuff and they don't carry dishwashing detergent. They have a very small section of that, but mostly, so they were pretty well stocked. But the 2 national chains, just some shelves were bare, other shelves had stock, and it was full, and that's still a consequence of their pandemic responses. A lot of the trucking and all the rest of this stuff with these mandates have huge problems. Canadians are in for it, their prime minister is worse than ours, and he enforced a trucking mandate. And so starting yesterday, they're going to run out of fresh fruits and vegetables because a number of the American truckers aren't going to transport them. And so we'll see how long that lasts. But just looking at what we're doing here, last week for the week ended last Friday, which was the 14th, the markets fell 0.3%. So that's the second week in a row that they fell. But if on $1,000 portfolio you would have lost 300, ours performed about that. Top 30 cap weight lost 260. Top 30 equal 8 lost 700, which is about double the 300, but still small. And then the top 3 every sector lost almost 1,000. My small portfolio gained whatever it was, $248. But I get all my stocks except for 3 taken away from me here this coming Friday. So I will be out of it, all into cash. If we look at the lists of our 54 stocks, and these are the top, 35 stocks plus some others, all in the top 100. But one stock went up more than 5%, and that was ConocoPhillips, up 7.6%. And then you had 4 stocks that went up more than 4%, less than 5%, and that's Bank of America, ExxonMobil, Philip Morris, Intel, Kinder Morgan, and Intel. Those were up in between 4 and 3. Then you had 4 stocks that went up more than 3, but less than 4. In there was the other oil company, Chevron, and AT&T and Comcast. So your communications plus oil in that group. And Kinder Morgan, which is oil services. And then 2 stocks that went up more than 2 but less than 3, and that's Tesla and United Health. Then 4 stocks that went up more than 1 but less than 2, and that would be Berkshire Hathaway, Coca-Cola, Google, and Adobe. And then 7 stocks that went up but less than 1%, 4 stocks that went down but down less than 1%, 6 stocks that went down in more than 1 but less than 2%, 5 stocks that went down more than 2% but less than 3%, and that would the big names in there, Bank of America, Netflix, and that's it. And then the stocks that went down more than 3 but less than 4, in that group you had Lowe's, Johnson Johnson, Broadcom, NextEra Energy, and Disney. 3 stocks that went down more than 4 but less than 5%, Target, Sherwin-Williams, and PayPal. And 7 stocks that went down more than 5%, 8 stocks that went down more than 5%, and that was UPS, a real estate concern, Crown Castle, Abbott Laboratories, Home Depot, JP Morgan, Nike fell 5.6%. AMT, which is another American Tower, which is another real estate concern, fell 6%. And Costco was the big loser for the week, falling 6.2%. We only concentrate on the largest stocks here. The reason that we only concentrate on the largest stocks here is because I was postulating that, way back, whatever, 35 weeks ago, 40 weeks ago, that the Fed has an interest in this pandemic premium, and the easiest way to support the market is by the prices of the largest stocks, because it takes less buying power and so on, because the markets are sensitive. The overall S&P 500 index number is very sensitive to the contribution of the largest stocks. Largest 30 are more than 50% of the market weight. And so it was my postulation that if you wanted to play, those were the stocks to play with. I think that's proved correct. If you look at what your for the year, well, I don't have the for the year numbers. I did those last week. But since April of last year, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 stocks that went up more than 30%. Nvidia, it's been falling a little bit. Last week it was above 100%. This week it's only at 87. ConocoPhillips up 70%, Tesla up 56%, Pfizer up 50%, etc. And what do you do going forward? I already told you what I was going to do, get out of it and wait and see. I thought the Supreme Court ruling might be more expansive than it was, but they essentially punted, is what they did, two narrow legalistic rulings. But it still attaches liability. If you're a company that was relying on the OSHA mandate, well, OSHA told me to do this, and you go ahead with a vaccine mandate anyway, your employees can sue you for wrongful termination, and so it's going to be a lawyer's field day going forward. The administration still hasn't done anything substantive about supply chain issues or rationalizing that. The cell phone providers are set to switch on their 5G networks. I'm sure you've heard about this. 5G, 5G, 5G. No difference in between that and 4G that you'll notice, but it just sounds good and they get to charge you more. But it operates on a different frequency. Turns out the frequency interferes with what's called the ILS system of aircraft, which is Instrument Landing System. And if they turn on the 5G towers within, call it 10 miles of an airport, then with the existing radar frequencies and the ILSs on a number of cargo and wide-body jets, they won't be able to land unless they have visibility. So in other words, no landing in fog, because the 5G signal interferes with the radio frequency that they use for altitude determination on final approach. And when you're bringing an aircraft down at near 300 miles an hour loaded with cargo, there's a hell of a big difference in between whether you're 150 feet off the ground or 130. It's not, your ILS radar has to be very precise, and none of these guys know what they're doing. They're going to wait. The administration is so oblivious that they're going to wait until there's a problem, before they even start to look at it. And I don't have a great deal of confidence that things are going to get better. I think we have 3 more years of this. What would I do? What will I do? All my stocks are hedged, and they're going to take them away from me this Friday, like I say. And I was thinking about it this weekend. For the for the midterm, in between now and a little while, some of these stocks, Exxon, Philip Morris, Kinder Morgan, which is an oil pipeline concern, they pay like a 5% dividend, over 5%. And there's other stocks, CenturyLink, and you have to have a stock with very good cash flow that's going to maintain the dividend. But if you either own the shares, which I already do, but they're hedged, I would have to repurchase the hedges and take the loss on the hedges, which isn't much. But if you own the stock and then just immediately hedge them, you're protected from any price diminution that might happen, but you forego any gains in those stocks that might happen, but you collect the dividends. So you can't lose, and you collect the 5 or 6% dividend. If the company runs into trouble and decides to stop paying the dividend, then the stock price in theory falls. But if it falls, the value of your hedges go up and you just liquidate it and you're even. And so just pick some large dividend stocks, 5, 6%, 4.5%, anything above 4.5%, and hedge them, forward calls, just, covered calls, forward, sell the covered calls on them, refresh them every 3 months. If the stock price drops, refresh them at the new basis and collect the money on the old basis. Works pretty good. So that's and if they go up, then you just don't participate in the upside, but you still get the dividends. And I'm that conservative. So I think that's what I'm going to do going forward. And I think that's about it for my time, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway, this has been the Bogdanich Perspective. It's Tuesday. It's always Tuesday. We're on TalkCast PDX at talkcastpdx.com. And if you have any things that you want me to address or suggestions or comments, send them to me by email, Paul at StockBettor. That's Paul at StockBettor, BETTOR. So StockBettor, BETTOR.com. and do widzenia, which means goodbye.